when governments and when the military don't take what we did seriously enough, it makes me feel like what we did over the last 20 years in the war on terror was kind of pointless. How do you reconcile the last 20 years?
I went into this job where I knew the end game is like you're killing people. So I took it very seriously, trying to get my mind ready for that. I literally just wanted to kill bad guys. On the ground, those bad people doing bad things are no longer doing it. Because I wish there was no war. I wish we didn't have to do it. But in the meantime, like while you're figuring out that solution, you know, children are being kidnapped. Women are being raped all over the battlefield. Like girls are getting acid thrown on them for going to school. Like public it's fucking crazy. Mm-hmm. So while you're figuring out this world peace plan, we've got to go kill some people.
All right, folks, I'm sitting down today with Dallasalexandr. So Dallas, you and your team hold the record for the longest sniper kill. You were one of the first Canadian military veterans, in my opinion, to become a celebrity in the US, thanks to the Sean Ryan Show. You've been a vocal advocate for medical freedom and against the CAF's abusive, so the Canadian Armed Forces abusive behavior towards its soldiers, and you're on the road to becoming a massive country music star. It's a real honor to have you here, man. And to be honest, I think my daughter, out of everybody that knows that we're sitting down chatting, is probably more fired up than anybody, man. She has been hitting Alexa hard with Adios Amigos. So thanks so much for showing up on the podcast, Dallas. So let's just start with, man, how you doing? We started with, you know, the weather, but let's get into a little bit more than just that and typical Canadian stuff. How you doing, and what have you been up to recently?
I'm doing great. I've been up to just music and the music business and family time. That's kind of the two things that I prioritize. Mixed in there is trying to take care of my health, mental and physical. But yeah, just a ton of music stuff, music business, trying to learn this new crazy business and endeavor I'm on, and spend as much good quality time with my family.
Right on. That's awesome. So let's get right into it. For folks that don't know who you are and what your background is, you were born and raised in the backwoods of Fishing Lake Métis settlement in Alberta. And you made it all the way to the ranks of the JTF2. But not only that, a sniper in the JTF2. That's a huge accomplishment. So can you fill in the gaps? How did you go from Alberta in the backwoods to being one of Canada's elite soldiers?
Well, it was, I think growing up where I did, it helped a lot. It was just, you know, it's outdoors, it's being in the forest, it's freedom. That was my childhood, and I had a great childhood. Played hockey my whole life until the end of junior hockey. So physical fitness and like that training aspect and training hard, it was always kind of part of my life, because I wanted to play hockey professionally, actually.
Oh, nice.
And then in between junior hockey and deciding what the next step was going to be, there were some chances to go play, like, you know, some pro hockey either down in the States or in Europe. I wasn't going to go to the NHL. I learned about JTF2 from a guy I was working with in the oil field. And it was like crazy. As soon as I heard about it and then verified it was true, I was hooked immediately. It was like all I ever wanted to do was play hockey. And then as soon as I heard about that job, that there's this counterterrorism unit in Canada, it was like, that's what I wanted to do next. And then that became my focus. You have to join the military for 2 years before you can try out. So I did that. And you go and do selection. And then if you're ready, or ready or not, it's coming. Then you might get picked up. And I got lucky enough, I guess, on my first selection, try to get picked up and go on the JTF2 assaulter course. So it was like, I look at it in a few different, my life now that I'm playing music. It's like my big focus when I was young was hockey. And then the big focus, like my middle life so far to my age, was trying to become a special operations soldier. And then now it's like that same focus I've had in both of those things is into music.
Mm-hmm. Would you say there's a correlation between being a high level athlete and getting selected for the JTF? Are there other high level athletes that you've
Oh yeah.
seen? What do you think it is? Do you think it's just the fact that you've already got that elite mentality, so that it's
What?
just a natural kind of
Yeah,
correlation?
I think it's like I don't. It's not a prerequisite, but you learn teamwork, you learn hard work, you learn winning and losing. You have to learn to be humble, or I mean, that's a lesson that should come out of winning and losing and playing in an environment like that. Learn to kind of be courageous. Like if there's fighting and violence in hockey, and you're like
Yeah,
you
a
gotta
little bit.
you know especially playing junior hockey, especially playing junior hockey in either junior B or Manitoba Junior League. There's a lot of scrapping, and it's like it really helps with the mindset. I think that's why. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of guys that played high level sports, including pro sports, that uh, were ended up in JTF2.
Mm, that's really interesting. So, needless to say, if we put together a veteran hockey league, I'm going to pick you on my team.
I haven't skated in a while now.
Same here, man. Same here. But I'm assuming you're a winger.
I was a centerman for most of my career. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. I mean, I don't know if you can tell just by my stature and size, but I was a natural defenseman. My biggest claim to fame, they picked me for the Canadian team, all the veterans, heroes of hockey. I don't know if you remember that from like 2012. I actually made the Quebec team, and then before they got all the way to Quebec, they ran out of cash from whatever happened.
Oh,
so
shit.
they took my pitch. I think it was because I was the only English guy on the French team. I think
Yeah.
I think it was the diversity hire. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I'm like, we can't just have a whole team of French guys from
Yeah.
Valcartier. So I throw this slow Anglo on the D line. It'll be fine. So that's great. I love hearing the background stories of folks that get into high level soldiering, because I mean there's always that capacity to get built somewhere, and I rarely, like from the folks that I know that have made it to the ranks of Kansoff, they all have something that was sparked in them at some point before they got in, which I always find really interesting, whether it's sports or whether even it's music. There's something that takes them to that next level. So it's like they've leveled up at some point in their lives. So then they're able to level up in the Kansoff world. So Dallas, the first time I saw you or heard of you was actually on the Sean Ryan show. That show came out of nowhere for me. And obviously it came up on my YouTube feed because, well, it's a military podcast and you're Canadian. And I was super intrigued right off the bat. It's like, whoa, what the hell's going on here? I'm like, Canadian sniper talking about stuff. Because let's be honest, it's not really a thing in our culture, right?
Yeah.
To talk about what we've done and our successes. So what was that like? How did that even happen where, you get an invite from a guy like Sean Ryan to go talk on a show about your military career?
Well, I got out of the military, and I think my perspective on it is that there's a way to do it properly, to share stories and give a little bit of insight into the world that is special operations. And I think some units do it pretty good, and we just have never done anything really. And there's people like to throw around this blanket statement of OPSEC, and it covers everything under the sun until it's not convenient for them. And you see a bunch of like kind of hypocritical behavior, and to me, I scoured the story that any story really that I was going to talk to Sean about, and I consulted with a ton of different guys in our unit, older, younger, high ranking, low ranking, and just went through it and said, okay, actual OPSEC, which means like operational security. Mm-hmm. What are the things? I'm like, here's all the stuff I'm not going to talk about. There's something I haven't considered in this and that, and like, because it's important. It is important when used properly. So I think there's a good way to balance people getting the stories, because it also inspires, if none of the military stories came out before, like that was stuff that was fueling my fire when I was training to try to get to JTF2. It was like all these different stories and movies and things like that and books because it's like your only insight into what the hell you're getting into. Do you know what I mean? So it's super inspiring to me, and I thought that it would be important. Now, Sean Ryan reached out as I was just starting to post stuff on social media and build this music career, but with stories from the military. And I hadn't really told the story of that long sniper shot. Now, the Canadian government and the military put out that story in the newspaper shortly after it happened in 2017.
Right.
But they also didn't tell it properly. Surprise, surprise. So I was like, okay, let's just talk about it. We'll get it straight. And yeah, Sean invited me on, and it was really cool because it lined up with my first trip to Nashville, where I was going for songwriting, because he's just outside of Nashville.
Okay. So the story aspect, I like that you brought that up. That's something that I noticed as well. I don't know if it's a Canadian thing, but there's been just a complete lack of storytelling within our community.
Yeah.
One of the first individuals that inspired me to actually get into podcasting was Jody Middick, because he had a podcast going for a little bit and he had his books. I read his books. I listened to his podcast. And I remember once he said, man, one of the reasons why I'm doing this is because nobody knows what we've done. Nobody has a clue. Nobody has any idea what folks in the military here in Canada are up to. I just want to be able to tell stories, funny or not, and have people understand that we've done stuff that may surprise you. And I was like, you know what? That guy's onto something, man. And so it really got me behind the mic, because I'd never had any experience doing this. And so now I get to talk to folks like you and share those experiences, because I think they're so important. And that's one thing that I think the Americans have got nailed down, is their ability to talk about their experiences, but they're not self-aggrandizing. And I think that's where our culture needs to adjust a little bit, is that just because we're talking about things doesn't mean we're necessarily self-promoting, or even if we do have a business around it, we're trying to benefit, obviously, ourselves in terms of like, we want to grow, but we also want to bring, wealth and abundance to those around us. It's not because I'm not trying to do this to become independently wealthy. I'm doing this because I do want to be able to give back to those that are around me and have abundance for my family. And I think everybody can kind of get behind that, but it's weird that a lot of folks have a kind of negative connotation. Have you come up against anybody that has pushed back on you, government aside? We all know that the government got kind of prickly, but have you come up against folks that are of the opinion that, well, why are you talking about this stuff, man? Like, this is professional stuff that you should be keeping back at the the teams.
Like the unit is like split on it. I got a bunch of good friends still, and a bunch of supporters who love what it is and what I'm up to, and then the other half is like, absolutely not. And to me, I don't care. It's my life. It's my stories. I own my own experiences. If you don't like it, don't listen. And then there's there's some online trolling that happens, but every time I invite them to a show, no one shows up to talk about it in person. It's just, if you're going to be in the public space, I'm sure you get this with podcasting, like, some people are going to like you and some people are not going to like you. And I know right off the bat that I'm not for everyone.
Well, it's a curious thing that you bring up here, because I've noticed this with my friends that are in policing as well. I noticed it in the military as well. You're a very creative dude, clearly. Art is part of who you are.
Working on it, yeah.
Yeah. Working on it, yeah. So clearly that makes you a little bit different than most. At least that's the way I perceive things. I've always been relatively artistic too, and I think a little bit differently. It was hard for me being an NCO a lot of the times because of just the way I perceive the world. I had a hard time just accepting orders as is, because I was like, well, these are kind of fucked. Like, this doesn't make any sense. We should be doing it this way instead of that way.
Oh, my whole career was, I say I was a terrible soldier, because I'm like, I really just think for myself, and I don't believe in rules really too much. I'm like, I have very strong and strict rules for myself, but like, I don't follow rules because someone else gives them to me. Do you know what I mean? And not to cut you off, but I feel the same way. Like, even with NCOing and with rules and orders and all this stuff, if it didn't make sense to me, I'm like, yeah, fuck that.
No, I totally get where you're coming from with this. And that's where I think, especially organizations that are a lot more conservative, military policing, when you start breaking away from the mold, it gets people a little bit prickly because who are you? Who are you to go off and start playing guitar? What do you think about it? It's like this attitude of no, crabs in a bucket. Make sure you stay in that bucket.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is that I didn't get to the ranks of CANSOF. I stayed as a reservist, NCO. But the fact that even you're at that high, level of soldiering, and I wasn't, you still have a culture where it's kind of forcing you to kind of stay. I don't know if it's mediocrity. I don't quite know the motivation, but it seems like there's a threat because you're different. And I don't know if that taps into like our deep ancestral DNA, but it's unfortunate, but it seems like you got a grasp of it, and part of who you are, you don't give a shit. It's like, yeah, well, I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. So with that being said, you went on the show, you went on Sean Ryan's show, you talked about your experience. Most of the experience that you talked about was not about being released from the JTF. And I'll ask anybody that's listening to this show to go listen to the Sean Ryan show, because this show's incredible. I wouldn't do it justice to go over that. But on the show, you mentioned something about mild traumatic brain injury, because you said, well, at a certain point, like, you're going to look for a medical release anyways. So I'm curious to know, like, what is it like as a sniper and as a member of the elite of the elite? Is there a lot of concern around mild traumatic brain injury? And if so, like, what are you guys doing about it?
Yeah, the concern's growing. I think I was there during a time when it was not a thing that was paid attention to, and watched it grow into something that we started paying attention to. Outside of like actual you're knocked out concussions, which come from, like, we do a lot of, whether it's hard landing in a parachute or, like actual fight training, stuff like that. Like, outside of full blown, you're knocked out and you have a concussion, a big factor being looked at now, which is in almost every part of the job, is this mild traumatic brain injury stuff you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So like free fall openings. So like you're going from free fall to opening your chute when you're full equipment, a helmet has night vision, you're under oxygen, like all this stuff. It's like, it's a jarring effect. Now guys have hundreds to thousands of jumps. Okay.
Thousands?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Holy shit.
And then you're like, okay, now you add that to large caliber sniper rifles, which have the same, like, you shoot a 50 cal, you fucking feel it. You shoot thousands of rounds, you're feeling it all the time. Explosive breaching. You'll run through buildings doing CQB training or overseas explosive breaching, and it's like your brain's always getting that. And every day you go to, let's say, the fight room and you're sparring, you're doing whatever fight program. So it's like every part of the job has something rattling your brain. For me, it got to a point where it was like really benign things would bring on concussion symptoms for me. Like a smaller caliber, 5.56 or 7.62 caliber would be like, oh man, I'd feel it. We call it like bare ass jumping. Like, you don't have any equipment. You're just like little wind bath, free fall, go to open. And I'd be like, oh, light sensitive. I'd feel nauseous, like concussion symptoms were coming on. And I would just take longer breaks, and then I would go back and, you go spar, you do it, just whatever. It was coming on very easy, and we're not the first people to have concerns about this. I know there's like the NFL did a big thing. They had a bunch of problems in CTE, and they made that movie Concussion out of it, but it's just something to be aware of. So I think now that guys are more aware of it, they're at least looking for one, different ways to treat it afterwards. And then how to mitigate it a little bit more in the day-to-day stuff we're doing.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that there's more awareness within your community, because that's something that I was tracking as a high school teacher. It was occurring at the high school level, and we weren't really doing much about it. We started implementing some protocols, but I did my master's research on it because I was really interested in what is actually being done and what's this going to have in terms of effect on our kids. It's bad, man. And then imagine, you played hockey, right? So
Had a
you
couple there
probably
too. Yeah.
you probably accumulated. Yeah, the worst sports are American football, hockey, and wrestling. As a if you use like per minute or per game time exposure, which includes practice,
Boxing's got to be up there. No,
well, the funny thing about boxing is that it depends what metric you're using. It's because in boxing, you're not in a full fight every time you're in the ring. You're sparring a lot, and your fights are really short. So the amount of exposures is very low, but the concentration of them can be relatively high, just like an MMA fighter. But the amount of exposures for a hockey player, most practices, that's where you get your bell rung. And then you end up going playing a game, and you do 3 practices a week and then a game. Same with football too. So being more aware, and especially with troops now, like even firing the 84, doing a day of Claymore ranges, you don't think about it, but it's literally getting your bell rung. Well, I shouldn't say literally getting your bell rung, but it's you're getting a mild concussive force every time you're in there. So I hope that we're getting a little bit more awareness on that, because that could explain a lot for folks that are experiencing what they think is post-traumatic stress.
Oh, there's so much overlap in symptoms. It's crazy. It's like, it's hard to tell where one starts and the other begins, or if it's one or if it's the other. I agree completely.
Yeah. And especially with your level of experience, right? It sounds like you're just constantly having exposures to potential head injuries,
every
right?
Single day, because you're either jumping, fighting, shooting, doing explosive breaching. Like you're doing one of those every day of the week.
Well, I mean, I had one experience as enemy force with the JTF when I was a young corporal, and it was, to say the least, explosive. They're like, hey, sit here, don't fucking move. If you do, it's your ass. I was like, yes, sir. And everything exploded around me, man. It was just so loud and cussive, but I wasn't in it, but I felt it. And I was like, man, you guys do this all the time? Like, this is what you guys do? I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. But I didn't realize what the effects that could have on the human body, just because I was young and dumb at that point. So it seems like in your case, you're doing all right. I mean, you're knocking this interview out of the park. You're singing. You're you're making your writing songs. Yeah. You're awake. You're doing great, man. You're doing great. So let's touch on the hot button topic here, the politics, right? You got Canada's politicians, or maybe just, I shouldn't say politicians. I have no proof of that. You got the Canadian Armed Forces. You got their panties in a bunch, like bad. Now, I don't think that was your intent, but maybe you could clear that up. I think you were just telling a story, right? About how things unfolded for you during the mandate era. For me, it brought up a lot, because it was, for me, it was an injustice, man. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm very much tied to the Canadian Armed Forces. It helped me become a man. So like, I have kind of that as like my second father growing up. Yeah. I don't know if it was the same for you, but I have a lot connected with the institution. So when I hear a story like yours, and I mentioned it on an episode that I did in response to yours, that it's interesting to see that it doesn't matter that you are one of Canada's, top soldiers. You still got treated like you were a child. And I love that fact that you said, hey man, like, you selected us to not be bullied. This was like an ultimate selection test. Like, hey, are you going to take this thing? You're going to take this thing? You're like, no, fuck you. I'm not doing it. Like, no, I'm not going to get bullied into it. And it made me realize, like, it didn't matter if you were in the JTF or like in a reserve unit. Everybody was getting treated the same. And that just blew my mind. So I linked it to what we call, if we want to call it, moral injury. It's, a new term that's come out to label things. We always got to label things. But I'm just curious to know, was that the thing that bothered you the most? Was just the institutional letdown? What was it about it that kind of, got you riled up, or if anything at all?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I look at it, and the government and the unit got very upset, or certain people in the unit. But I was like, the only part that they were upset about was really that portion of the interview, because everything else I'd already posted, like the things that they tried to go after Sean for, like with the cease and desist and like OPSEC and this and that. They gave these stupid reasons. That's why he brought a lawyer on after to talk about it. It didn't make any sense. It was because of the story about how I got like kicked out of Dwyer Hill. But most of it, now there were days where I'm like, this is just so stupid that I would, I'd get angry. But most of it, like, I'm not angry. I'm not upset about anything. Like, I'm super happy where I'm at right now. And it's not even just a silver lining. It's a blessing that I'm out. And I can't imagine now deploying and not being with my family for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. Like, it's just, it's past for me anyway. I just I almost found it comical. I'm like, that this was the stance. And I thought when all the crazy mandates and stuff were coming around, I was like, okay, at least our camp, we're not going to lose our minds within this small camp. I'm going to be able to go to work, go train, we're just going to keep after it because we're focused on counterterrorism things. And I was terribly wrong about that. we really lost it. And so I almost found it funny. And I'm kind of a stubborn guy when it comes to what I believe in. And when it was mainly because it was a big charade is why I'm just like, I'm not playing this game. And it's not even necessarily challenging medical advice is where I think the charade is. If everyone really believed it, I'd be like, like if my grandma really believed, I'd be like, okay, I'll stay 6 feet away. Like I believe in freedom and I don't need to be near you. But it would be so like hypocritical. It was such a charade. Like we would be having a conversation, no mask. Oh, so-and-so's coming, so we have to put on our mask. And I was like, I'm not playing this game for 1 second. And I just started getting in trouble. And like, so most of it I look at, I just shake my head and I laugh. And like, I just wonder now these guys, they look back 2 years, if they're like, oh yeah, I definitely did the right thing. Or if they're like, shit, I really got caught up in something.
It's like
I am not happy with what I did.
Yeah.
So none of it really is upsetting to me. I had a good career and I appreciate the experiences and a lot of the people I met. And I'm happy that I'm out playing and writing music.
That's very stoic of you. I like that. It's nothing can be taken away from you, especially when it comes to, well, I say there's a few things that can never be taken away from you. Your education, and it's an ever appreciating asset, and the way you look at things. So if you maintain those two things at all times, if this was a good experience for you because it ended up being positive in terms of, well, now you get to spend more time with your family, you get to work on your music career. This was just a thing, and it's something that you had to go through, and it happened for you, not to you. And so, you're clearly not a victim of this whole charade, which is why I think your message is so important. And touching back on the episode you did with Sean, that episode was like if the CAF were to take that as a recruiting video, dude, you know how many guys would join? Do you know how many guys would join? Yeah. It was the best video ever. I'm like, man, can I get back in? This is amazing. But they can't see the forest for the trees. Yeah. It's like, shit, man, like give this guy some credit, man. He brought a lot of visibility to the Canadian Armed Forces, but that's neither here nor there now. Yeah. They went all in on their stance. And I think you brought up a good point. Like, I wonder how they think now, but we'll see, I guess, in the future. One thing that has always kind of bothered me was like the institution, right? Like when governments and when the military, in my perception, don't take what we did seriously enough. And that's the best way I can describe it. It's like there's not a seriousness with us deploying. And it makes me feel like what we did like over the last 20 years in the war on terror was kind of pointless. I try to seek answers. So I fell on a really good paper, and I got to thank my buddy Logan for pointing this out. I'm going to bastardize her name. She's Dutch, so her name's Tina Melendijk. Anyways, the name of the paper is The Role and Political Practices in Moral Injury, a study of Afghanistan veterans. The biggest takeaway from this is that we can't separate ourselves as soldiers from the political decisions that are made, because we are instruments of the state. And like, just to quote something from the paper, it says, "I'm just an instrument of the state," is in fact a contradiction. Being an instrument of the state means that one's profession is intimately linked to political practices rather than disconnected from them. So, with that being said, how do you reconcile the last 20 years? Like, there was a lot of fighting, and you did likely a lot more than most. How do you perceive that now? Do you get upset when just the government, let's say the Canadian government, acts in a way that seems to be, I don't know, lackadaisical, not very concerned with the course of the country, with the way veterans are treated, with the way the military is treated? Do you have any input on any of that?
Yeah, like I think I expect from politicians what one should expect. They're going to lie and they're going to play a game to try and get votes. So I don't really take anything any politician does too personally. I just want to be left alone and pay less taxes.
Amen, brother. Amen.
And it's so I don't, basically what I'm saying is I don't give a shit what they think.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reconcile part for me in my career is just, I went into this job where I knew the end game is like, you're killing people. So I took it very seriously, trying to get my mind ready for that and process it as it was happening, and not box things up, and just really, because it's a serious business. But I also don't really care what a politician wants when I'm on the ground either. I literally just wanted to kill bad guys and not make believe scary things that I'm told, we're fighting them because they're wearing this uniform. Like, we saw bad shit and the people doing it, and then we got to kill them. And so I don't really care any politics that are all around it. It's like, we're doing the world the service, and you can paint it however you want if you're news or if you're a politician or you're a company. But on the ground, those bad people doing bad things are no longer doing it. So it's like just trying to pitch in. I don't know. It's like a dark way of looking at it. But that's, for me, I honestly, I wanted to do that job. And I said, okay, how can I do this? I feel like I'm cut out for it. I feel like I can handle it. And I feel like it's a service, because I wish there was no war. I'm not like a if all the war was gone, and I have discussions with people about this where they're like, violence stuff. Like, I agree. I wish we didn't have to do it. But in the meantime, like, while you're figuring out that solution, children are being kidnapped. Women are being raped all over the battlefield. Like, girls are getting acid thrown on them for going to school. Like, public it's fucking crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So while you're figuring out this world peace plan, we got to go kill some people. Like, so for me, I was like, how do I do that? The best, who's going to give me an aircraft to get there? Who's going to buy me all the gear and let me shoot as many rounds as I can to get good at it? And all these night vision, like, special operations is going to do it. So it was like, for me, it was just the place to go to do what I wanted to do. And the politics and the story told behind it will always change. And if it's advantageous for the next votes, they'll use it in a good way. If not, now they don't like the military, blah, blah, blah. I don't really care about any of that.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you brought up that kinetic aspect of things. And from what I've understood from the research is that folks like yourself, folks that are in, like, on the pointiest end of the stick, it seems like you're able to get a better grasp of what you were doing during the global war on terror. And you're, like you said, you're able to process it as it happened. And it seems like you have a very good outtake on it because you were able to take action on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think it would be so two things. I put in a lot of work to process it. And I think this is a message I'm trying to pass to guys and gals that get out, is like, you still have a lot of responsibility to take care of your own mind and mindset and growth. And if you're having problems, work through them. There's a lot of tools out there. And just like you trained really hard to get good on a certain weapon system, you need to put effort into making yourself physically and mentally good. Outside of that, I could see it being extremely frustrating and see where just like it would be so hard if you're in, you know, like some of the rotos I've heard about and just like handcuffed to have to do these stupid fucking jobs and like and just or no jobs at all, just like the vast array. And we had to deal with that too. Like we would be they didn't just let us free to go do whatever we wanted, as much as I wish that was the case. Like we really had to find the gray space and work within what we had to go get stuff done. It was always a challenge. Like it actually surprised me. I thought when I got to JTF2, they're going to be like, we're going to give you more ops than you can even handle. Like you're out every night. And it was more us on the ground fighting to get out the door with higher ups and politicians and commanders and generals of all kinds of countries. It was more us fighting to get out the door than it was them sending us out to go, you know. It was very weird. That was something that caught me off guard.
Hey folks, I just want to interrupt this podcast for a hot minute to talk about skincare. Yeah, I know, not something that you might typically expect from a podcast like this, but skincare for me has been really important ever since I deployed to Afghanistan. Let me explain. You see, while I was deployed, I saw a lot of guys not taking care of their skin, and when they got home, they looked like a leather mitt. I didn't want anything to do with that, so I had a pretty serious skincare routine while I was deployed, but I've always struggled to find the right product since coming back. Well, that's where things have changed. I've recently started using Skin Mason as my everyday go-to skincare product. This is a two-step process and it's for guys. So you take the scrub, you scrub your face, and then you finish it off with the serum that's right here. This two-step system has already shown results and my skin feels a lot softer and looks a lot better from when I first started just a few days ago. Because you're a loyal listener of the podcast, I want to make sure that you're well looked after. If you go to skinmason.com and get your first order today, you're going to get a 10% discount by using the code H2KPOD. I hope you can find a product that works for you and that you can start looking a lot younger, a lot fresher, and a lot harder to kill in the near future. So that's skinmason.com and grab your skincare products today. Yeah. From your perspective, that makes a lot of sense. It's literally what they're talking about here in this paper, is that it was a political decision from folks sitting in Ottawa saying, but what about the political blowback what about if we go there and then so how about we just don't? But the folks on the ground, like yourself, like, no, we got to go take this guy. Like it's now. What are we waiting for? Right. And that creates this sense of helplessness. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but it feels like you're just being manipulated by these folks that aren't really in the war to win it. And I'll bring up a great comment from another podcast guest. I don't know if you know Stu Scheller. So he was the Marine lieutenant colonel who criticized the generals in uniform when Afghanistan fell. It was pretty badass. And I had him on a podcast and he basically said, like, are we here to win or not? Like if you engage in a war, you should be engaged in a war to win the war. So if you're the general in charge, in command, you don't leave until you've won that war. So it's like, that makes a lot of sense, Stu. It's like, yeah. And he goes like, Petraeus, like I'll quote what he said is like, General Petraeus said we messed this thing up in Afghanistan. But then he was the poster child for counterinsurgency to say like, we failed without saying I failed. It's like, man, how do you go about saying that to folks? Like you were the dude, you were in charge. Yeah. But the failures all came from an inability to reconcile with the fact that, why were we kind of fighting over there? But it was funny when I was deployed. So I was on an American camp, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, but we'd see like a chopper come in. I was like, what the hell is that, man? And it'd be I don't know what chopper. I think you guys were flying weird choppers. So guys would land and you'd be like cool hair, cool weapons. I'm like, I got it. You're in the cool guy club. That like, yeah, we just need a quick briefing on, because I was a CIMIC guy, so I knew all the little interactions between the local population. So we do like a 15-minute briefing. So you land and like it was like, I don't know. The feeling I got was excitement from the small teams that are there. It's like, yeah, it's like we're on the ground. It's like, hey, if you guys want to come like hang out, but like, yeah, we're good. I'm like, yeah, I figured as much. Yeah. But I got this sense that like there was a sense of fun and excitement because they were outside the wire. And my impression was that, oh, these guys are out all the time. The other thing that was kind of funny too is like I knew every time your guys showed up, I'm like, I'm gonna have a lot of Afghans at the gate in the morning. I'm gonna have to pay out a lot of money. There's gonna be some stuff broken. It's just like I gotta get ready. Shit's gonna get blown up. So, anyways, that was cool. So on our call last week, just to get to know each other, I called you the most dangerous man in Canada. And I don't know if that's going to stick or not, but there's a reason for that, because you're physically dangerous. We know that, but I think the thing that you're likely the most dangerous in is the fact that you're an artist. And we all know throughout history, right? Artists tend to get persecuted in a tyrannical system. Certain art gets deemed to be anti-tyrant. So they throw it out, they burn it, they get rid of it because it causes people to think, right? That's what art does. It, beauty inspires us. And that's kind of the worst thing for any kind of government that's trying to like lock things down. Hence the reason why I called you most dangerous, because you're like a double threat. There's just a lot of bullshit going on. Like, let's be honest, like whether it's in the Canadian Armed Forces, whether it's, what's going on in like Ottawa police. I've heard some ridiculous stories about like cops getting hit with like TAC teams for like trumped up charges and stuff like that. Like it's getting a bit crazy. And I bring this up just because you've been in the country music scene for a little bit now. You did a cover of Oliver Anthony's song, which was about the maid issue, which was interesting because, man, when I heard of that, I was like, that's not true. There's no way that that's true. Yeah. And so for folks that are just tuning in, like what's MAID, that's the Medical Assistance in Dying legislation that's here in Canada. And to give you folks some context, some veterans were offered this on the phone as a solution. And you decided, Dallas, that you were going to say something about it, but you did it in song. So what was the inspiration for that, man? Because clearly, like, you had to rewrite some of the verses and take some time and effort to actually put that out. What was it that inspired you to get active on that particular topic?
Well, for one, I like the song that Oliver Anthony, which is not his real name, but Oliver Anthony Music. I can't remember his name's like Chris or something. But,
oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so Oliver Anthony was his grandpa. And he has it as like, it's almost like a band name, like we're playing Oliver Anthony Music.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, I like that he's just, my favorite music, country or not, and songwriting is just truthful lyrics. Just for me, I happen to like it over top of country chords and, fiddle and stuff. So I like what that song did and what it said and what it mentioned and touched on. And I just wanted to make it a little more Canadian, I guess, because I play it too at live shows. Like we were on tour for September to October, November with Gord Bamford, and we'd open almost every set with that song, but with the verse about MAID. Because I agree. I think music and creativity and art it gives a different flavor to what you want to talk about versus just kind of yelling about it like some people tend to do. You know what I mean? If it can be in a song, it's almost like it's easier to digest or like it makes you think a little bit more than if you just, have a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a big rant or something on a video, like, cause I could be like, fuck you for offering MAID and blah, 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 and make a video, or I could make it a verse in a song. So I don't even know why. I was just playing that song. I learned it cause I thought it was cool. And then I was playing it one day, and I just I'd seen something about the Mage stuff again come up, so I just was singing it and kind of started to freestyle that second verse. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I could make this a little bit of our own here, and so we did.
Yeah, it's very cool. Hence the reason why you're the most dangerous man in Canada. You didn't go on a rant. You create a song, dude. That's huge. Because let's stop. Like my daughter could be singing it in a week. Now it's a meme in the culture.
Yeah.
And talking about memes, I have to say your meme game, top shelf, man. That one you did with Radio Check to Tucker Carlson. I had a belly laugh, man. And I was like, this is well done, sir.
I think I was stoned.
Well, keep it up, man. Like let's keep that free weed going your way.
Yeah.
Let's get that meme game tight. So now that we're on music, let's get into it, man. I'm a huge music fan. Now, country music is one of those things I go in phases. I definitely go in phases. I saw you on Andy Stump's podcast, and I got to get clarification on this. You went from the JTF, and then you started transitioning into, well, I'm assuming you had kind of like an idea like, hey, I'm going to get into music, but you said you went to your first open mic, and you said it was the scariest thing you've ever done. Yeah. Now in my brain, I'm like, how is that even possible? You just said like all this stuff. like for me, the stuff that you did in the military, that's scary ass shit. But you're like, no, going on open mic was the scariest thing I ever did. Okay, you got to explain that, man. What was so scary about it, and what was that whole experience like?
I don't know what it is. You know, like when they say there's people that have, I've heard this somewhere where it's like the order of things people are scared, and like public speaking is like literally number one. And like
there's
people
like 50% 50%
of
people would rather die than like do a speech.
Yeah.
It's like, so, what are you talking about?
It must have been some part of that, because it's such I was really new to it. So this was I remember it. This was the fall of 2019. So I think it was like August or September. Yeah, it was in September. But I was just getting in. I just decided that music was going to be my next thing. I just didn't really know how to play it yet. So I was like, I got to figure that part out.
That's
so
insane.
I started learning a few songs, and I could play a couple songs. I've had a guitar a while, but it would like sit in the corner. I wouldn't touch it. And then I'd play it a year later and learned a couple chords here and there. But I just wanted to be able to sing a song at a campfire if that ever came up where they're passing the guitar around. So I could play like one or two if I would go back and refresh and remember. And then I was chatting with people at bars, because I was like, okay, you have live music. How do you book your music? They're saying, oh, you need come in, you play for 3 hours or 4 hours. And that blew my mind. I was like, all different songs they play for that long? You're like, yeah. So I had to start learning. But anyway, to the open mic point is I could play 3 or 4 at this point, and I was just going to as many open mics as possible. But the first couple, this one is the one I was talking about. I'm new to it. I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, it's something artistic. It's something creative too. So it's like, this is extreme vulnerable space you're in. Like, I was like,
and it's just you, right? You didn't have a band with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, I'm about to get on this mic. Hello. And then fucking I'm here to sing you a song. Like, and people are at the open mic because they're singing or they want to hear some music. So
right.
I find it is funny to think about, because it's 6 or 7 people in an empty bar that probably were half listening and are there to support hearing an open mic. So it's not like there's literally no consequence. Like, the worst thing that could happen is someone's like, "Hey, boo, you suck." Okay, that's the worst thing.
You're right.
Still, yeah, I was just so nervous. It was fucking terrifying.
It's really interesting to hear, because I mean, clearly you come from a high performance background. So I'm kind of blown away. You only started playing in 2019, and you've got songs that I'm listening to. I'm like, man, this guy's got some chops, man. Like, you got some pipes, man. Like, you're hitting another octave. First time I listened to the song, Adios Amigo, where you hit the next octave at the end. I was like, oh shit, this guy's not messing around. Good on him.
It's funny. So I'm about to release that song, our studio version. We redid it in the studio, and there's like where it goes high like that at the end. We kind of took it. It's like probably the only part of any of the songs where it sounds like I'm a rock singer or something. The engineer and producers was working with, they're like, okay, I think we could get it to here and get it to here. And I was like, yeah, let's give her. And it came out sounding pretty rock in that specific chorus.
I can't wait, man. Yeah, because I mean, that's one thing I noticed too. Your music that's published now. I'm listening on Spotify. The songs are done in a live recording in front of an audience. So yeah, they sound good, but they're not at the studio level. And I'm like, this guy's not even in the studio and it's this good. What's that going to sound like in the studio?
Well, that was like, the only reason I did that is because I had been writing like crazy. Like I said, when I decided I wanted to do music, it was this crazy focus. I might have some type of attention thing, but I was like, fuck the military, now I'm playing music.
Right.
And I was just giving her every day. And so I had a handful of songs written, but I was having a hard time booking shows because people would say, well, do you have music out? And I'm like, well, no, not really. I play sometimes on Instagram or whatever. Like, okay, well, just let us know. And I was like, fuck, I got to record something. So I had a gig set up, and I was like, well, let's record this. And then whatever you do in the studio, to the studio out of Smith Falls here. And I was like, so I can have music online. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, can you do that? I've heard live albums before. And the guy's like, yeah, for sure. So we just recorded it and put it out more so that I could tell people I had music and start booking bar shows. The studio definitely tidies it up for a bunch of reasons. Now it was 3 or 4 more years of playing, but then like professional players playing guitar and drums and bass and fiddle.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? And like amazing, like, so the 2 singles out, Child of This Land and Can't Blame My Bloodline, those are off my record. So those are studio recordings, and it's a big difference.
I wanted to get into one of the verses in Adios Amigo. My favorite song is actually a little bit hippie, but needless to say, Adios Amigo is a close second.
Too in the studio.
Oh, that one's going to be fire too.
Yeah.
You've got an interesting playing style. I like your chord structures because I can play them. That's the best thing. I'm like, I can play this.
Simple.
You got to play to your bass, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm a beginning guitarist too.
Yeah.
Can't really sing that well, but I think we're in the same key, so that's good. But the Adios Amigo verse where you go, they say it's all inside heaven and hell. What happened to that angel when he fell? Give it just one try. Tell me you don't like it. Be God for a moment. Don't despise it. Dude, that verse is heavy. So let's get into it, man. Adios Amigo. Now, this is my assumption, was about your kill in Iraq, the longest shot, correct?
Yeah.
So that's the context of the song. But that verse, man, that's deep. Could you explain how you were feeling when you came up with that verse in that song?
Yeah, I think so the lyrics, I mean, because they're songs that I wrote, they're very connected. Like there's so much texture in them for me. When I just hear you even reading that, I think about being back in that hotel, what the war part was, the chillin' part, like all this stuff. In writing it, it's like, there's such fond memories of like that specific part of the roto for me, where it's like, and the heaven and hell being inside is, I believe that like you can have an amazing experience kind of in 2 people in the exact same thing, depending on what's going on inside of them. One can be on top of the world and one can be like in the deepest pits of depression. Do you know what I mean? Like literally be on a sunny beach. One person just got married and one person just had somebody die. And the only difference is what's going on inside of them. And war has a tendency of being that exciting, and it's what you're trained for. And now you're here and you're deploying, but also it's it's crazy, and you see crazy things, and you hear and smell crazy things, and like all of that. And depending on how you process it, it's inside. Are you loving it, or is it eating you up, kind of thing? So there's that, and then the part is, you hear about this, and it's, I don't know, I guess it's not really cliche, but it's like, when you hear about playing God, if you're deciding, because you're on a sniper rifle or calling in an airstrike, you're literally about to decide if this person down there is going to be killed. Like, that's it. So there's a part of me that loved doing that. And so that was kind of like, if you were in these shoes, you would know what I mean. Like, you would do this and you wouldn't hate it like you say. So it's kind of to the negativity that people have towards war, which I get. But if you're there for the reasons that I was there, you would understand why I like it, sort of thing.
Really cool way to put it. The act of going to war, the act of being a soldier, the act of taking a life. I think most folks that have never experienced war, it's wrapping their heads around the fact that we want to be there. It's like, why would you want to be there? It's like, no. Like, this is what I signed up for, man. And in your case, like, you enjoyed it. Yeah. And you also understood the responsibility you had too, but you wouldn't have traded it. And somebody else to have that experience may change their mind as well. And that's where, if we link it back to storytelling, right? These are the stories that don't often get told in Canada, man. Like the idea that war fills, fills maybe a hole inside of us that, or maybe it's an experience that we never really fully appreciated until we got there. And I think for some, it's almost like a void, because you get the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. And then you realize, wait, this was the best part of my life. I mean, that was my story for a while, man. Like I didn't have nearly the same experience that you did, but I felt amazing when I was deployed.
Oh yeah.
I hadn't had that feeling when I came back. I was teaching 12-year-old kids how to add and subtract, man. I wasn't getting the same highs as I was when I was hopping off a chopper with night vision on, being like, this is cool shit. Yeah. It's not the same. So that storytelling aspect and the fact that there's a certain danger involved with it in terms of storytelling and getting that out there and forcing people to think is really, really cool. And I'm glad that somebody like you is finally in this space, man. Because I'll be honest, I'm going to call it. You're going to be at the Country Music Awards at some point, man. I'm going to call it. I'm calling it. Like, you're going to be there, and like all of the Canadian Armed Forces veteran community is going to be like, Dallas. It's going to be cool, man. I'm not going to lie. So you have a few tour dates coming up. From what I understand, you're in Alberta and Saskatchewan, but let's get into what's up for you coming down the pipe. You got an album coming out. You got tour dates. What's that looking like for you? And then how can folks kind of follow and make sure they get on board with the Dallas Alexander train?
Yeah, get on board. I got 2 singles out right now from this new record that I recorded in MCC in Calgary. And the album is out, if you consider out like an old school way. It's available on vinyl through my website, or at our shows you can buy it. It's just not out on, let's say, Spotify yet. So I'm slowly putting out the songs. I'm going to release another one next month, another one month after that. And I wanted to have it available first for, people that want like a hard copy, old school kind of enjoy it that way. The record's out, and I'm just about to head to Nashville for the month of March to do some songwriting. I have songwrites booked with other writers every single day in March. So it's going to be like a marathon of songwriting, and I'm going to do some more vocal coaching and try and take that up a notch. And then April, I'm on tour in Alberta and Saskatchewan, a bunch of shows. I think we're doing like 8 or 9 shows on our own, meaning like me and my trio, and then 8 opening for Gord Bamford. So it'll be a good mix. We get the opener stuff going and have our own stuff going. So it's going to be fun. love going back to Alberta whenever I can. And then after that, I'm going to be down in Key West for the Songwriter Festival. And then it's kind of, I left it a little bit open after that because I got the visa in for us to be able to go book and play in the States. So if that happens, then I'll be going full throttle down there. Just trying to figure out that process right now.
Very cool. Any dates coming up in Quebec by any chance? Just
no.
I'm just busting your balls, man.
No.
You're not going to come to Quebec. That doesn't make any sense. I'll have to go to Ontario. I get it.
Maybe there's what's the festival in Montreal? They have a Lasso festival, I think.
They have a country music festival.
Oh yeah,
festival here.
Yeah,
no,
fucking Chris Stapleton played there. I think 2 years ago. A big festival. It's like a big country music festival. So maybe that one.
Well, I guess I got to retract my last statement and being a jerk. So yeah, I'm not surprised we have like an awesome music festival here that I don't know about because I've been in dad mode for the last 7 years of my life. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be great. Like if you are it's not because you have to be in Quebec for me to go see you. Like I fully intend I'll be whatever show that you're able to put together within like the geographical region of the GTA Montreal area.
I think we're going to play out in London in July, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Awesome. Definitely keep us here at the Hard to Kill podcast up to date with that. And I'll gladly post any dates that you have so that folks can come down and see you and support your music and your new career. And do you have any last words that you want to share with folks that could act as a way to inspire them to chase their dreams? I know it sounds really cliche, or for just folks that might be wondering, like, man, like, how do I get involved? How do I do something bigger than myself?
I would say start by just figuring out your own priorities, and give yourself time without distraction. I feel like we're in a time, especially now, where it's like, oh yeah, I want to do this and I want it to happen immediately, and then you're on social media and that changes the next day, or you forget about that thing. And it's like, a lot of people talk about the magic of manifestation, and I think it's just keeping focused on something for a little bit of time and then it will happen. Like it happens because you fucking keep it a priority and you stay focused. And like, I'm a big fan of that. I focus on what I'm on and I try to shut out as much of the other things as possible. Do that, and while you're doing it, just be nice to each other out there.
Oh, that's sweet. That's really sweet. Thanks for that, Dallas. The most dangerous man in Canada is telling you to be nice to each other. That's why you're the most dangerous man in Canada.
Well, we're being tricked into always having to have an opinion on something and pick a side or something, and it's not true. You don't have to have an opinion on everything. You don't have to have a side on everything. You don't have to pick like liberal, conservative, Israel, Palestine, like all the things on all the lists. You do not have to have an opinion if you don't want to, and you don't have to divide yourself from another group of people because the news is telling you to. You can just be nice to everyone.
Oh man, I love that message. And just as kind of like a final thought, how many opinions do you think like our dads had, and then how many opinions do you think our grandparents had? Like they might have had like 5.
Yeah, like 5 total opinions.
My God, my favorite food, how I raise my kids, and like that's about it. Like they had they're like, I don't have room for any of this other stuff.
It's like the best way to brand your cattle.
It's like, this is how I fish.
Yeah,
this is how I take care of my family.
This is Red Devil's the best lure out there. That's like, that's it.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I love it, man. Dallas, thanks so much for spending some time here on the podcast and sharing your wisdom and insights. This has been a real hoot, man. And like I said offline, you helped me kind of level up my podcast to 2.0 because you're on the Sean Ryan podcast, got me fired up to put some commentary out there. And now 3.0, I got a new studio, and it's all thanks to guys like yourself that are just kind of getting out there, sharing your stories, and inspires me to do more. So keep on doing what you're doing, man. Can't wait for the album on Spotify. Don't have a record player anymore, or I would have the vinyl version for sure.
It's coming. Yeah.
And continued success in the future, brother. So keep it up, man.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Show.
That was a good chat. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. And folks, don't forget, train hard, fight easy. I'll see you on the next one. Peace. I hate t-shirts that get floppy in the arms after 10 washes. So that's why I created a bunch of t-shirts with high quality cotton just for you so that you can go to the gym and look fresh, sport some philosophy, and smash those PRs looking good. So you need to head to davemorrow.net/merch, grab yourself a hat, grab yourself a t-shirt,